Hey everybody, and welcome to our first episode of Alex and Answers. With me is our latest addition to the team, Stefan Ogbeck. Want to go ahead and say hi to everybody there, Stefan?
Hi everyone.
So Stefan's going to be charged with helping with these episodes here. If you have any burning questions that you want us to answer, you can email them right to Stefan. His email address is going to be down there at the bottom of the screen. Stefan used to work on Buyer's Guides for Motor Trend, so we're really lucky to have him. And he'll be doing the same thing, helping us refresh the Alex and Autos website. So be sure and go over there to alexandautos.com and check that out. There's going to be more content in 2021 that's going to be website only. So there'll be some content over there if you prefer to read it. And there'll be, of course, all the traditional video content here on the YouTube channel. So you can watch that as well. So with that out of the way, let's dive into the first question that our viewers sent in.
The first one's looking for a car that has all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, but must have at least 25 to 30 mpg combined because he or she has a 60-mile commute.
Oh, that's a long one. I feel your pain. I used to have a 60-mile commute.
45K or less, too.
45K or less, too. Okay. So I would say in a commute that long, especially at higher speeds, you're probably going to want to look at either a ultra-efficient small vehicle with a CVT. There aren't too many of those that give you all-wheel drive, so your options there are kind of limited. But I would probably really strongly suggest something like the RAV4 hybrid. It has the all-wheel drive system. It's not going to be quite as capable as some of the other hybrids out there, some of the other all-wheel drive systems out there, rather, but fuel efficiency is going to be absolutely tops. You could also take a look at something like the Honda CR-V hybrid or the Ford Escape hybrid. Those have mechanical all-wheel drive systems. They're going to be a bit more capable, generally speaking, but the fuel economy is going to be a little bit lower.
So yeah. I was going to suggest a Subaru Forester or a Crosstrek. Mainly more the Crosstrek, though, because the Crosstrek is fantastic, and with the 2.5 liter is fantastic.
Sure, those would be good options. Obviously, city fuel economy is going to be lower than the hybrid, but highway fuel economy is going to be pretty good. The Chevy Trailblazer is quite inexpensive, and actually, I'm constantly impressed with the Trailblazer, to be perfectly honest. Some people may not be the biggest fan of a 3-cylinder turbo, but honestly, it's not half bad, and the fuel economy
it's
really
totally fine. Yeah, it works as it is, and then the 9-speed's fairly quick, though. I think I prefer the version with the CVT, but that's front-wheel drive only, so that's on the list too.
There is one benefit there that if you want all-wheel drive, you get the 9-speed, and a lot of people seem to prefer a traditional transmission over a CVT.
Yeah.
So there's one option to get one there too.
If you have to have something, with a little more space, then you might want to look at the RAV4 hybrid. But yeah, we're kind of harping on the RAV4 hybrid here for a good reason, though.
Good, really it is. I mean, it's like you can realistically get 40 miles per gallon in it if you're gentle on the highway. Honestly, it's one of those things. It's like the Windows of the automotive world. It's always people will complain about it, but it's always a safe bet.
Yeah, and if you want something maybe if you're looking for a little more luxurious RAV4, then you can get the Venza. So question number 2 is, any news on the Pathfinder?
Pathfinder, yes, and by the time you watch this video, we can actually share that news on the Pathfinder.
Yes!
So the news on the Pathfinder is that it is all new, but it is basically a rehash of the same formula as before. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of rumor going around that maybe it would go back to rear-wheel drive, and we can now safely say that the reason for that confusion is that Nissan had a spec sheet that was roaming around internally, may have gotten leaked, I guess, to the rumor mills, that accidentally said it was rear-wheel drive. Oops. Turns out it's not, and it is using the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission that's found in the Honda Pilot, a number of Jeep products, the Range Rover Evoque, and a bunch of other
FCA and Land Rover products, too.
Yeah. But on the bright side, that means it's probably going to be faster than the outgoing model because that 9-speed has a really aggressive first-gear ratio. Fuel efficiency is also probably going to be excellent. So, I mean, there's pros and cons there. The rest of the Pathfinder, however, looks really good. It looks basically like an inflated Rogue. I like the look.
Pro Pilot Assist, too?
The latest Pro Pilot Assist and a lot of family-friendly features. So they've expanded the ability to keep a child seat latched into the second row and still tilt and slide it forward to both sides of the bench seat rather than simply one side. So a lot of really great features, and because it's staying front-wheel drive, it's probably going to be big on the inside too. It's really square, and the Pathfinder's always been generously sized, so that's probably going to continue.
Yeah. Next one. So we have somebody who's getting their first car from New York. They need all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, new or used, 38K or under.
Getting their first car. Well, congratulations on your first car.
Yeah.
I
Watch out for
assume
the
in New
crazy New
York you
York
could be of
drivers.
any age. Maybe we're turning 16, or maybe we've turned 40 and we've just decided we need a new
Yeah.
car. It's hard to tell. So with that in mind, I'm not going to go for any stereotypical teenage answers here. I would say in New York, you're probably going to be wanting all-wheel drive, even though I
Yeah.
could probably be just fine without it. That seems to be the general preference. I would probably stick with something in the small crossover segment with standard active safety, a lot of standard active safety features.
Mhm.
I'm really, really keen on the latest autonomous braking, especially with the junction turning assist features, which is really handy in the city. So the latest in active safety technologies from most of the mainstream brands in their absolutely latest vehicles use the cameras and sensors to detect that you're turning left across traffic and there's oncoming traffic. And so they'll be able to try and auto brake and keep you from that particular situation. So that's really handy. In city maneuvers, I would also suggest looking for a car with parking sensors in addition to parking cameras, because those really help in parallel parking maneuvers, as well as the reverse auto brake package. So with all that in mind, I would say any of the mainline, compact crossovers are going to be a good option. The RAV4, the new Nissan Rogue, if you're looking to spend a little bit less money. The Koreans have the new Tucson coming out, but the Sportage is a little bit old. What are you thinking?
Speaking of the Sportage, the new one's delayed, by the way. It was supposed to have been shown this month already, but it got pushed back a few months, I believe. Yeah. So I would say if you're going subcompact, I would say Crosstrek, just because of eyesight. And then if you don't mind going to a compact car, there's an Impreza, or if you want to go with a little something premium, the Mazda 3. So,
although I would CX-30 before I Mazda 3'd, to be honest. It's like I like the Mazda 3, but the CX-30 is cheaper and better.
Yeah, which is crazy, but I mean that's where the market is. Which is
you can get a CX-30 turbo.
But
I've always actually been surprised by the complaints about the CX-30 feeling underpowered, because it's got way more power than an HRV. I mean, it's way faster in its base form than most of that segment.
Yeah.
I always thought it was funny that people thought it was underpowered, because I've read those reviews and I've thought, these people are crazy. Are we driving the same car?
Well, here's a question about EVs. This person's asking whether EVs are a good choice for someone who only drives once or twice every 2 weeks, and is there a break-in period for EVs? So Alex, this is actually a question directly at you, because you've had an EV, and you have a fuel cell vehicle right now too, which is technically an EV.
And an EV on order. So our Mach-E has been delayed until the second week of February, so fingers crossed and stay tuned. But yeah, actually EVs would be just fine for this kind of occasional use situation, because you can, if you're really not driving very often, you can very easily save money on getting a shorter range EV, especially if your distances aren't terribly long driving. And even if they are, if you've got a day or two of downtime between, you can avoid having a level 2 charger installed in your home and just use the emergency charge cord the car comes with. It'll charge slowly, but you should be just fine. There's no break-in period on a modern EV, so there's nothing to worry about there. And to be perfectly honest, most new cars, actually most new gasoline and diesel vehicles, don't really have a true break-in period either. So a lot of engineers that I've talked with say that modern vehicles, especially those modern vehicles that have suspiciously long oil lifetimes of 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles, there's really no true break-in period with these cars. They're broken in essentially from the factory. But they put it in there in the instruction manual because people feel naked without it, and they want to see that break-in instruction, etc. It's always a good idea to drive a car gently until you get familiar with it. That's probably the most break-in advice most new cars would need. It's funny because manufacturers, when they send us cars, they always make sure they have a few hundred miles on the odometer, just to make sure that everybody feels warm and cozy about the car. So they actually pay, and one of their employees or one of the fleet management companies drives it around for a few, days or whatever to put some miles on it, make sure everything is fine. That's really all that generally goes on in a break-in period, is just making sure the car was assembled properly from the factory. It's had that inspection there. It's had the inspection at the dealer, but sometimes something could rattle or whatever, and you want to, have a period of time where you get used to everything.
All right. So, another question from the same person. Will we do hands-free driving tech videos on the Mach-E when it finally arrives? And is that big screens distracting when you're driving?
Oh, that's a good question. So I will definitely be doing that because our plan is to keep the Mach-E through probably most of 2021. And late this spring is when the over-the-air update will be available for the self-driving system there. Well, hands-free driving, I should clarify there. Hands off the wheel. So this is very similar to autopilot in the current autopilot public version, only you don't have to have your hands on the wheel. It's like Super Cruise and like the new FCA system. It'll be, I believe, a $600 option. You'll use your app on your phone to buy the option. It'll download itself automatically to the vehicle. It comes with all the hardware right on it. So we'll definitely be talking about that. Also, I thought it was interesting that they're not doing the Ford thing where the hardware is on the vehicle and you activate it later. So with the Grand Cherokee L, if you buy a 2022 model year one, which is the new one, the new 3-row one, that will not have it. And it will be the 2023 model year vehicle available in calendar year 2022 that will have it. You have to wait till then. You can't upgrade.
Oh, wow. All right, so let's move on to the next question. We have somebody who wants a sports sedan. So he's thinking of three different kinds of 3 Series, E90, F30, and the new G20 3 Series. So he's also asking what other sports sedans, like sports sedans in that class would we consider. So I'm going to start. Can I start this one off? The G20 3 Series, I would say, is a Grand Tourer. It's not really that sporty anymore. So,
True. I mean, one BMW purist would have argued that the E90 wasn't either.
Yeah. Even though it kind of was pretty sporty.
That is an interesting spread because the E90, I think, was arguably sportier, though, than the current 3 Series.
Oh, yeah.
Like over time, the 3 Series has gotten bigger and softer and more comfortable and more luxurious and better put together and better designed. And I like it more than the E90, to be perfectly honest. But as far as like driving purism, the older you go in the 3 Series lineup, generally a little bit better in most enthusiasts' minds. If you're looking for a sporty sedan in that category, I would probably say the most fun ones that I've driven honestly have been the Jaguar XE. I think is really great. It's probably going to have some reliability issues. And actually it's funny because the less reliable the car, the more fun they are. So the Alfa Romeo is definitely in there as well. That is absolutely a hoot and a half to drive. As long as you steer clear of the twin turbo 6, you're probably okay. The 4-cylinder's been relatively good. I don't know, what do you think? What do you think about the about that
I would
segment?
go G70 would be my choice just because it's so well balanced. It reminds me of the old E46s, but
I like the G70, but it's like in my mind the G70 is more like what Lexus could be. Than overtly sports sedan, I guess. I would say if you sent this question in, be sure and write back in and tell us whether you're leaning new or used, because that's really going to change, I think, this calculus a lot.
No, that's for sure. So our next question is looking for a new SUV that's convenient and luxurious. He's got the Telluride and Palisade in his short list and wants to know how it compares to German luxury brands in terms of comfort. He likes loaded trims, by the way, but doesn't want to go German because it's expensive. Doesn't want to do a Tesla because he wants to do some long road trips. Likes the GV80, but out of his budget and can't get around spending that much money on an Asian brand. I would not. If you're looking for an SUV as big as a Telluride or a Palisade, I would immediately erase that GV80. You know why? Because
it's just not big enough.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. I would say, a good middle ground might be the new Acura MDX. If you're willing to step up a little bit, but not quite go full on BMW or Mercedes money, the MDX I think is going to be a great option. The new 2022. Honestly, levels of comfort, this is a tricky one. You will certainly notice that the BMW is similarly sized to the Telluride and Palisade, which would be the GLS or the X7, to be perfectly honest, are going to be a lot more comfortable. They're going to be better put together. The materials are going to be better. They're going to have better bells and whistles. The build of the car, the materials used in the car's construction, from the suspension standpoint, the tires, the wheels, the brakes, everything is in a next category. But the price tag is like several categories beyond.
Oh, for sure.
So that would be obviously the trade-off there is you are getting an intrinsically better car, but with a much bigger price tag. On the value question mark, it's hard to beat a top-end trim, honestly, of a mainstream vehicle when you're talking about features for the dollar. And if you're willing to go a little bit smaller in the back seat, and the third row primarily is where things are going to shrink, then the Acura MDX is going to be a great middle-of-the-road option. The MDX, the Q7, and the XC90 are all pretty similarly sized inside. The MDX is the newest of this bunch. We're going to be seeing a new XC90, rumor mill says next year maybe. Possibly towards the end of this year we may actually see it, but it'll be on dealer lots likely in 2022.
Yeah.
But I would probably highly recommend Acura MDX. There's a reason it's the best seller in that segment.
Yeah, and if you can't stretch for the MDX, grab the Telluride or the Palisade, because you're not going to get any better if you're going to be hauling a lot of stuff, kids, people, whatnot, cargo.
Yeah, and of course there's the new Pathfinder as well, so that's coming out soon. Yeah. And it occurred to me that Jeep Grand Cherokee L actually probably ought to be on that list. So if you are looking for something that's a bit more premium, you could Grand Cherokee L. We don't know pricing details just yet, but by the spec sheet, it looks like FCA is trying to target sort of that Telluride Highlander kind of shopper up to something like an MDX shopper in the pricing range. So it's going to be a little bit more premium in those top-end trims and a little bit more expensive, but probably better value than the others, and one of the only rear-wheel drive options.
All right, next one. So can we give this person a round of applause, because he's looking for a minivan.
A minivan, yay!
Person's looking for room for 5 plus. So that's the 5 people are 2 adults, 1 toddler, a newborn, and a mother-in-law or 2.
Mother-in-law or 2. Oh, okay.
So 6 or 7 passengers in total.
Yep. So with any kids in child seats, especially when you're going to be using the third row, that would always make me lean Pacifica. The main reason for that is the Pacifica is the only minivan in this segment that has second row seats that tilt and slide forward when something's latched into place. So as long as your kid is weight-wise in the window of being able to use latch anchors rather than the shoulder belt anchorage method, then you can leave that child seat latched into place, tilt and slide the second row forward, and have people easily access the third row. It's going to be a lot easier, especially if your mothers-in-law have mobility issues or if they're getting on in years, etc., for them to be able to crawl over the back. It's going to be so much easier than really any of the other minivans out there right now. The caveat there would be you can't get the hybrid Pacifica because the seats don't do that in the hybrid. It's only the regular
to remove the seats on the hybrid.
Right. But let's go down the other list. So there's obviously the new Sienna, and that's hybrid only. There's the Odyssey, which is a good solid option for a lot of people. The Odyssey has become really popular in the U.S. Why do you think it's become so popular?
I think it's because one, it's a Honda, obviously, and number 2, I'm gonna guess it's that middle, that second row that you can slide in and out like that, and you can remove the set. You can basically do a lot of things, but that also comes at a caveat, because that means you can't really take out those seats, and if you can, they're probably very, very heavy. So
the Odyssey second row seats do come out. They're really heavy, but the big thing is if you get that magic sliding thing, then the base module that makes them slide around does not come out. So then you have this big hump in the floor that you got to get over. Honestly, if you're worried about reliability, I have zero doubts that the Sienna is going to be the most reliable vehicle in this category and the most efficient with the hybrid system. But if you want all-wheel drive, that extra child seat convenience, and some of the newer bells and whistles available, it's probably going to be Pacifica right now. But there is a new Carnival coming.
Yes, the Carnival. And I think the Carnival is going to be the most luxurious one of them all, because if you've seen the versions they have in Asia, my God, that is like ultimate anti-paparazzi mobile right there. Curtains, like for literal first-class seats in the second row. So, but I'm going to go ahead and say Pacifica, just because Pacifica is, it's the best minivan out there. This one is asking whether he should keep his old Audi A8 or trade it in. Is it better to keep a car that's working perfectly fine, or will the maintenance and other upkeep costs make you justify in trading it in for something new?
Ah,
So
this is a tricky one. Yeah, so my usual motto is don't tell the car companies this. Um,
Mhm.
the car you already own is going to be the cheapest car to own, generally speaking. Like there are
Yeah.
exceptions to this rule, but in the general world, the car you already own is the one that's going to be less expensive. Because when you think about it, your Audi A8, sure the engine is going to be expensive to replace, but if you had to rebuild the engine or replace the transmission, that's still a lot less expensive than a new sedan. So even if you are out $10,000, which is what it could cost, all in to do some of that work, you have a brand new engine, same as you would in a new car, and you're worried about the rest of the car falling apart at that point. But that same logic applies to everything. So when you calculate it all up, I would say, until you're spending several $100s a month every month on repairs, that's when the tide starts to tip in favor of the new car.
Oh,
I've been there
sure.
myself. I had a Jag at one point that started eating $600 a month. And after a year, I decided that that was a new car payment, and so it left us.
That was an
Um,
XJ8, right?
that was the Super V8. That
Oh, it
was,
was a
yeah.
Super
I
V8.
loved
Yeah.
loved it, but it was broken a lot at that stage in its life. It had over 150,000 miles on it. You had a good run. But it was that calculation that you finally end up with, like, man, maybe it's cheaper
Yeah.
to replace it.
We have one more question to go, and so she's currently leasing an X2 and wants to switch to something dog friendly and can navigate less than ideal terrain to go to a cabin, which she goes to more than a dozen times a year. So the criteria is if it's going to be a used car, it has to stay under 35K. Um, and she is also currently leaning towards a V90 cross country.
The V90 cross country, interesting. I like the V90 cross country a great deal. Um, it has that promise of being the grown-up Subaru Outback, if you will. Um, Obviously, the Subaru Outback is in contention if you're considering an off-road minivan, or sorry, an off-road station wagon, off-road station wagon, we should say. Um, if you're looking at new, I really like the E450 all-terrain, but it's not as high off the ground, which strikes me a little funny. It's quite low, actually.
The Audi A6 Allroad is also not that high off the ground.
Yeah, but at least
Yeah,
its air suspension lifts it up higher. It's a lot closer to the V90 cross country with it up in its up height mode. But the Mercedes claims 5.8 inches max in the E450, which strikes me. I think that must be wrong. I think their spec sheet is wrong.
That sounds wrong.
Yeah, I'm waiting for an answer back because they say 5.8 inches, and then somewhere else in the spec sheet it says a 2-inch lift over the regular E450 wagon. And I'm thinking to myself, how is it possible that the regular E450 wagon is 3.8 inches off the ground? Like, sports cars are generally in that height territory and not a station wagon.
If you're okay with keeping it compact, and she's already in an X2, I would suggest an A4 Allroad or a V60 cross country too. Another one that's kind of not really an SUV. It's kind of more of a tall wagon. I would say the X1.
I like the X1 a lot, actually. Yeah. It's a lot more practical than the X2. Some people think it looks too jelly bean-like, which is a bummer. But honestly, the X1's really, really cargo practical. The Mercedes-Benz GLB, I think, is lovely. It's got a lot of room in the back. It's a little boxier if you look at like that shape. It's sort of like a shrunken GLS. The XC40 is a great option there too. I think the XC40 is probably my favorite in the small luxury segment right now.
It must be the best one in its class right now too. So the only thing I will say though is that the X1 is getting up there in age. So
it is due for a refresh soon. My one complaint about the luxury off-road wagons is that generally speaking, they don't have a spare tire. So if you are a little off the beaten path and you've got, animals and cargo and people and whatever and all that melee going on, and you don't want to have the distraction of having to sit and wait for a tow truck, which can be a real pain if you've got all of that going on at the same time, having a spare tire is going to be critically important in my mind, at least. And you will find spare tires in the mainstream options, but for a variety of reasons, the European options generally don't have spare tires. So you don't find one in the V90. You don't find one in the Audi A6 all-road, as I recall, and you certainly don't have one in the E450 either. Well, everybody, thanks for watching, and thanks to Stefan for joining us for this section of Alex and Answers. Be sure and email him down there your next questions. Hopefully, we'll be having an episode like this once a week or two. We'll figure this out over the next few months or so and fine-tune things, obviously. So post all of your burning questions to him via that email address. He'll organize them, slot them in, and hopefully in the future, we will then get back to you and tell you when your question is going to be featured here at Alex and Answers. I'll see all of you next week.
Cheers.